Today we'll be looking at the most successful decks from the 2025 Atlanta Regional Championships, which saw over 2,600 Masters Division players in attendance. If you ever wish you could know more about what the meta is going to look like, I have a solution for you. I actually told everyone in my Metafy community my top 4 archetype picks for this event, and they ended up being the only 4 archetypes in the Masters Division top 8. As well, I shared a post going into detail about why this would be Dragapult's event, and the only deck capable of taking it down would probably be Gardevoir. If you'd like to learn more, head on over to my Metafy link that'll be in the description down below. I offer one-on-one sessions, guides on the fundamentals of the game and specific decks, as well as the community I mentioned, where I share deck lists, metagaming information, and have discussions with the community. Now let's talk about the best decks from the 2025 Atlanta Regional Championships. We're going to start with the first place deck, Henry Chow's Gardevoir deck, featuring a thin line of N's Zoroark EX. So Gardevoir did lose the Refinement Kirlia with rotation. This was the first post-rotation major event for the TPCI areas. So this variant of Gardevoir, we see the players have replaced that Kirlia refinement with, like I said, a thin line of the N's Zoroark EX. And Zoroark EX, of course, has the trade ability. You must discard a card from your hand in order to use this ability, draw 2 cards. Now, this card being included in the deck list was so important to the players on this version of Gardevoir that they also included a rescue board and 2 copies of Professor Turo's, just to make sure that that N's Zoroark could not become a liability and get stuck in the active. The reason why they needed to have this N Zoroark EX in play was to combat cards like Iono and Unfair Stamp that will get rid of your hand and thwart all of your options to close out the game. We also saw that this deck list was very cognizant of the popularity of Budew, seeing there's a card like Jacques over a 4th Ultra Ball, or over a 3rd Ultra Ball, excuse me. And we also see early items like Buddy Poffin that are more important to see turn 1 over more copies of Nest Ball, which you'd typically be using in the mid to late game, turns where Budew might be stopping you. So it's much more important to get into those Buddy Poffins early so you can get a Ralts and a Zorua, or a Budew and a Zorua. And then that Jacques finds both a Zoroark EX and a Kirlia, and that starts stabilizing your board. Again, like I said, especially under the Budew's Itchy Pollen item lock. I think a lot of the successful decks were prepared to play against the Budew item lock more than some of the unsuccessful decks, or less successful. I was not surprised to see that the ace spec of the winning Gardevoir deck was not Brilliant Blender. I've been very adamant when talking about Gardevoir for the post-rotation that Brilliant Blender is a card that makes sense because you need to get Psychic Energy into the discard pile. However, it's such a weak ace spec to play outside of that. So it makes perfect sense to see the secret box in here that can find a combination of cards, whether you need a supporter for consistency like a Research or a Morty's Conviction, or you need a supporter like Professor Turo's to get something out of the active, or Iono to disrupt your opponent. And of course it also finds item cards and tools and stadiums, so it can help you out with a myriad of different cards that you need regardless of the point of the game that you're at. Next, in second place, we had Andrew Hedrick with Dragapult Dusknoir, and this had a slew of great players playing the deck list as well. We'll see here again that the deck list is built to be functional in a world of Budew's Itchy Pollen. So a high count of supporters, especially seeing supporters like Jacques here, because you can't use your Ultra Balls under item lock, so Jacques helps you find your evolutions, as well as Professor's Research, a card that you'll be seeing a lot more of in Dragapult, I think. Previously, it wouldn't really have been played in Dragapult, but now when Arven is a very unflattering card against Itchy Pollen, you know, Arven's basically just getting you a tool card, and that's not very helpful. Professor's Research becomes a much more playable card that's going to help your deck function. We'll also see that they opted for a 2-2-1 line of Dusknoir Dusclops instead of a 2-1-2 line, playing the second Dusclops and only 1 rare candy. Again, noting that a lot of these games were going to be into Dragapult mirrors using Budew, or into Gardevoirs using Budew. or even some of the other decks that are utilizing Itchy Pollen, like Frostlass, Budew, and even Archaludon Poison will sometimes play Budew now. The Luxurious Cape is there for a couple of reasons. The Luxurious Cape protects a benched Dracloak from a Torrential Pump from Wellspring Ogerpon EX. And although Terapagos wasn't too successful at this tournament, it was a pretty hyped deck going in. I actually said multiple times I thought the deck was way overhyped and would hurt its potential for the tournament. So yeah, Luxurious Cape protects Dracloak from a Wellspring Ogerpon, either in the active or the bench. And that card's kind of replacing XP share in the deck, EXP share in the deck, because an EXP share on a bench Dracloak doesn't really do much if the Wellspring Ogerpon's just going to knock it out anyway, whereas the Luxurious Cape can protect it. We also saw the Luxurious Cape come into play in the finals match between Dragapult and Gardevoir, so you can, protect a Dracloak or protect a Duskull if one of those cards, if just that card surviving for one more turn is going to save you the game. And it's also notable that the Luxurious Cape on Dracloak does make it worth 2 more prizes, but once you evolve into the Dragapult EX, it loses that effect because it's now a rule box Pokemon, and the Luxurious Cape becomes a moot point there. Next, in third place, we had straight Dragapult. So this is going to be Dragapult without the Dusknoir line, opting to have room in the deck for other options. Now, I do think a shortcoming of this version of the list is that they were not as prepared for the Budew mirrors, in my opinion, still playing the 4 Arven. Now, don't get me wrong, Arven is a great card when you're not being item locked, but like I said, just grabbing a tool card, you can still grab the item, but it's going to be pretty unusable because if your opponent's using Budew Itchy Pollen. And a lot of the players that find success at these tournaments, not only making it into day 2, but getting top 8 and winning the event, are not only thinking about what's in the field, but specifically what are the other top players going to play. So I wouldn't be surprised to see lists like this straight Dragapult go more away from the Arven in favor of things like Jacques and Brock Scouting, which I personally had in my list leading up to this event. And we could also see something like a TM Evo maybe making it into the list because of all the Arven. If they want to keep those Arvens, that can become kind of a consistency card evolving up into your Dracloaks if you can't be using your items. It does give up a turn of Itchy Pollen, but it would also allow you to actually play the game like we saw many times. The Dragapult decks on stream this weekend were just not getting to play the game for one reason or another. The Genesect is definitely a card to shout out here with that Ace Nullifier ability. It turns off your opponent's Ace spec, so that's incredibly strong versus Terapagos to shut off Sparkling Crystal. It's strong against mirror matches and any other deck that's playing Unfair Stamp. Can also be strong into Dragapult mirrors that chose to play Sparkling Crystal. Now they need that extra energy that they may not have anticipated needing. Next, we'll go down to 8th place to look at Keaton Gill's Terapagos Noctowl Bouffalant deck. So this version of Terapagos Noctowl Bouffalant is opting to play a 1/0/1 line of Pidgeot EX along with 1 rare candy. And they're also playing the Cyrano supporter, which allows you to search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon EX, which is a great card under item lock especially, so you could Jewel Seeker for like Area 0 plus Cyrano, play down Area 0, Cyrano for like Clefairy, Latios, Fez, or if you're not under item lock, you could grab the Pidgeot and candy down the Pidgey, and now you have a quick search established that's probably going to survive either the rest of the game or a pretty long time, because Pidgeot EX is pretty awkward to knock out. Can't get it trapped in the active, and even if you do knock out the Pidgeot EX, you're typically leaving another attacker on the field that the opponent is fine keeping. The other interesting card here is Volcanion EX. This was actually a card I was messaging some people about, because if you want to make the Gholdengo matchup better for this deck without relying on walls, you'll see that they did not play Cornerstone, and this is why. You can use the Scalding Steam once during your turn. If this Pokemon's in the active spot, you can make your opponent's active Pokemon burned. So you burn the opponent's Gholdengo, then do 240 to it with Terapagos' Unified Beatdown, and then the burn knocks them out going into their turn. So that's another way to take care of the Gholdengo matchup. If most of the lists are now a little more prepared for Cornerstone, or maybe you don't want to allot that space to Cornerstone and the second Monkey Dory, the Volcanion EX becomes an option. However, the Volcanion EX does need to find its way into the active to make use of that. So it needs to be on the bench, or you need to prime catcher up the Pokemon that you want to KO, send up Volcanion, burn it, then use your Latios for free retreat to go into your Terapagos. You could also use Toro, to get it into the active, then free retreat. So the Volcanion EX can be a little awkward, especially without a switch in the deck, but that's kind of the functionality for it. I'm not surprised at all that this deck made it to top 8 and then promptly lost to Andrew Hedrick, because I don't think this list is very prepared to fight the Dragapult matchup at all. We can actually take a look at a screenshot from the new labs.limitlesstcg.com, which shows us matchup information for real life events, and the labs.limitlesstcg.com is something I'm going to be experimenting with, especially over on my Metafy community. I'm going to be making a deep dive video looking at the results from Atlanta, looking at matchup spreads, things like that. But here we can see that Keaton played against 5 Dragapults and had a combined 1 win, 2 losses, 2 ties. Having an otherwise incredible tournament performance, we see that the Dragapults are what kept him down, losing to Dragapult Dusknoir in round 3, beating a straight Dragapult round 4, tying to a straight Dragapult round 5, and then tying another straight Dragapult in round 10, and then eventually losing to Andrew Hedrick in round 15 to the Dragapult Dusknoir. So this deck's shortcoming is certainly the Dragapult matchup. Down to number 9, 9th place. We've got a Gholdengo deck piloted by Bodie Robinson, who got 9th place. He made it into the asymmetrical top cut and lost to the Terapagos deck that we just looked at. So this version of Gholdengo is actually not choosing a partner. There's no Dunsparce, there's no Scizor, there's no Dragapult. Just a very, very straightforward Gholdengo deck, and it's nice to see this work, because at the beginning of a new format, a new rotation, a lot of times decks will find success just because, number 1, the deck is functioning at an incredibly high rate, and number 2, the player knows exactly how to play that deck, especially getting advantage when the deck is functioning so well. So with that extra space that Bodie got in his Gholdengo deck, without the Dunsparces, you see there's room for Iron Bundle, there's room for a full four line of Arven and 4 of Cypher Maniacs as well, and the Pokegear. So really high supporter reliance, really high supporter counts, and getting extra consistency in there in place of the Dunsparce line. And it worked out for him pretty well. Then right under there in 10th, we have Grant Manley with Gholdengo Dragapult. Of course, this is a Gholdengo based deck, still playing all the Gholdengo cards like Energy Search Pro, Superior Energy Retrieval. We see that Vengeful Punch as a counter to Pikachu EX, and then playing the 2/2 line of Dracloak for draw support, but also having the Dragapult EX as a secondary attacker, especially into something like a matchup where they're relying on Cornerstone that Gholdengo can't hit it. Well, Dragapult can just fine. So you'll see the 2 Psychic and the 1 Fire here to satisfy the Phantom Dive attack, and also playing 2 Crispin. The Crispin can also be used to attach an energy to Gholdengo and attach an energy to Monkey Dory as well. Doesn't just have to be used on the Dragapult. And we could take a quick matchup look for Grant Manley's matchups at this tournament. For those of you who don't use Twitter, Grant made a post talking about how the Flareon matchup going into this tournament was one of his worst matchups, or probably his worst. And Grant ended up hitting 3 Flareons, which was not a very popular deck. It did see some success, and we will be looking at it in just a bit. But he hit Flareon round 3, round 5, round 11, and ended up losing to 2 out of 3 of them, with those 2 being his losses, and then having a tie versus Dragapult Dusknoir. This is also a great time to mention that the current tournament system is very ruthless. Like 2 losses and a tie means you don't make top 8. It's very, very rough. I mean, we should be looking at top 16, top 32, even top 64 as pretty substantial accomplishments at this level of play, when even 2 losses and a tie knocks you out of top 8 contention now. And right under that, at 11th place, we're going to look at a Flareon Sylveon deck list here, piloted by Jonathan Means to 11th. So the most surprising part about this list is that they're playing Unfair Stamp as the A spec, as opposed to playing the typical Sparkling Crystal. I've also seen straight Flareon builds, no Sylveon, playing Prime Catcher, being a little more of an aggressive build, but Unfair Stamp here pairs very well with Angelite. So Sylveon's attack that says you could choose 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon and shuffle them into their deck. So if they take a knockout and you go like Counter Catcher to force their active to the bench, Unfair Stamp, and then shuffle 2 Pokemon to the bench. You know, you could shuffle in the Dragapult matchup, maybe you shuffle their Dragapult and their Jacloak, versus Gardevoir, maybe you shuffle Gardevoir EX and Kirlia. Versus Terapagos, you shuffle double Terapagos, then they're left without a Terra Pokemon on the board. You could do something similar to Terrabox as well, sometimes depending on what their board looks like. So the Angelite Unfair Stamp plays very, very strong, and you have Flareon's Burning Charge for energy acceleration, as well as the Carnelian for high damage output. And the Lily's Clefairy turns itself, Mew EX, and Sylveon EX all into Pokemon that can one-shot Dragapult if you do need to just take the dragon off the board. There was a different version of Flareon, maybe not too different of a version, but a different A-spec in 32nd place, piloted by Luke Smith. We see a couple different card inclusions here. The Judge for some hand disruption, so instead of the Unfair Stamp plus Angelite, you have Judge plus Angelite, which can be similar. And then also playing the Briar card, which if your opponent's at 2 prize cards remaining, you can take an extra prize card by knocking something out with a Terra Pokemon this turn, so you can get yourself out of uneven prize card situations that way. And yeah, like I said, this version is going to be playing the Sparkling Crystal instead of the Unfair Stamp, which I think the Sparkling Crystal is the more typical, more expected A-spec for this archetype. Then in 12th place, we had Isaiah Chevelle with Poison Archaludon. This is the Secret Box build. I do not like this version of the deck, but Zaya's a good friend. Congrats to him on the 12th place finish. I actually prefer the Poison Arch version that we're going to look at in just a second, but this version of the deck is more built towards getting the turn 1 KO with Pecharunt's Toxic Subjugation. So if you go first and your opponent only has 1 Pokemon, you could potentially do up to 8 damage counters with Poison without attacking on your very first turn of the game, taking a KO that way. And then from there, going into the rest of the game, you know, you have Budew, you have Archaludon, you have Blood Moon Ursa Luna, but a big portion of the deck's power is that ability to just steal wins away very early. Now, a few spots under that, at 15th place is Preston Rutledge, one of my students for a pretty long time, and I assisted him in making this deck list. He actually placed top 8 in that online Doom tournament that I got 3rd in with Terapagos Buffalant. So I've talked about this list a lot over on my Metafy. You know, I told people basically this was the Archaludon list you want to play. But I also talked about it here on my YouTube channel. So I like this version a lot more. You go second with this deck because your goal is to get turn 1 Arven for Precious Trolley plus typically Booster Capsule. Sometimes you'll grab a Mochi if you already have the capsule. But the Precious Trolley just gets you set up for the rest of the game, and it feels like a much more consistent, much smoother deck. It's not built to get those turn 1 KOs going first with the Pecharunt, but it is something that's still possible for the deck to do if you have the right combination of cards. In 28th place, we had a very interesting Gholdengo variant, playing a 2-2 line of N's Zoroark EX, and then it's also playing a 1-1 line of Leafeon EX. So this 1-1 line of Leafeon EX, Leafeon becomes a cornerstone counter because of the Verdant Storm. As long as the cornerstone has the 3 energy it needs to attack on it, then Verdant Storm's one-shotting it. Regardless if it has Bravery Charm or Hero's Cape or whatever, your Verdant Storm will be knocking it out. But that can be a pretty bad card to have in your deck against other matchups, but a lot of dedicated cornerstone cards are going to feel pretty bad in other matchups. but this list was able to get 28th place, piloting with a pretty unique combination of cards in their Gholdengo deck. There's also some nice synergy between the Levincia Stadium and Zoroark, and you know, Levincia just has natural synergy with Gholdengo as well, because you're returning energies to your hand, you need to discard them to use Make It Rain. But if you don't have other cards you want to discard, Levincia gets you Lightnings back, you could discard those with Zoroark. So for those of you that have been playing for a while, it might remind you of the Propagate Trade combo from back in like 2017, 2018 expanded. So yeah, pretty cool list of Gholdengo here at 28th place. Then we also have a Gholdengo at 31st with the Dunsparce in it. This might be looking a little bit more like what y'all have become accustomed to expect in this format. This looks a little bit more like the online tournament successful Gholdengos that we've seen. Here placing at 31st by Mark Perry at Atlanta. This is using a Klefki. The Klefki is interesting. You know, just starting that or being forced to go first and putting that into the active can be really great versus some decks. Really good against something like Archaludon Poison, really good against anything using Fan Rotom to find their Hoots and stuff. So cool card to include. Not sure if it's necessary in the archetype, but Mark was able to find success here getting into the top 32 with this version of the list. We're going to venture outside of the top 32 just a bit here to close off the video. So at 37th place, we have Brian Wade with Charizard Pidgeot. So Charizard Pidgeot, you know, 37th is not bad for a card, for a deck that people thought was just completely awful because of its poor Dragapult matchup. Still getting into the top percentages of finishers in this tournament, in this really big tournament too. So you'll see they have the Mist Energy to protect against Phantom Dive and maybe even some rogue Technical Machine de-evolutions. They are also playing Technical Machine Evolution to get up into their Stage 1, Stage 2s a little easier, as well as playing Grand Tree. And you'll also see they're playing a 2-2 to Dunsparce line to help them against Unfair Stamp, to help them against Iono, replace what might have been Bibarel in past iterations of this deck. But basically they're trying to set up a Pidgeot with Quick Search because it can search for any card every turn, and then Charizard EX is one of the strongest attackers in the game if you can get past setting up in a world of Budews and Phantom Dives. And then we have our highest placing Terapagos at 39th. Like I had said multiple times in multiple places going into this event, I think this deck became overhyped and its matchup spread just kept getting worse. Namely, it gets farmed by Terapagos Bouffalant, so that became a bit of a problem for the deck, but also just like Gardevoir and Dragapult adapted to how to play against it as well, so those setup evolution decks weren't as afraid, although Torrential Pump does have the chance to just blow anything off the board. If you take out two of their important Pokemon, or maybe even their two only Pokemon, you can get some early wins because of the potential to knock out two things as early as turn 1 with the combo in your hand, but typically turn 2 because you'll have to Noctowl for a piece. But yeah, this toolbox style deck that looked like it was going to rule the format, it's not, you know, it didn't even place into the top 32, even with some strong players piloting it. And I think I called that one pretty well. Not expecting this one to see the success that maybe a lot of people saw in it. And I also wrote about it on my Metafy, saying I think that sunk cost fallacy would keep people on this deck. Whether it's because they bought the cards for it, or they practiced it already, or they bought a guide on it. And, you know, I mean, the best deck for you is always going to be the deck that you know how to play the best, but this one just didn't turn out to be so great for this event. In terms of making it into the higher echelons of Day 2, there were still plenty of the deck in Day 2, it just did not get past 39th place. Speaking of not converting too well in Day 2, the highest placing Raging Bolt was actually 44th place, piloted by Christian Fontenot and also All Out Blitzel, aka James Kowalski, his real name. They both piloted this list. You might have saw James on the stream. A nice, pretty technical list of Raging Bolt as far as things go. you know, playing the Blood Moon. Of course, playing that Baby Bolt, the Baby Raging Bolt with Thunderburst Storm allows you to snipe off little Pokemon, so that's really nice. And, you know, it's something that I think without an option like the Baby Raging Bolt, I'm not sure that technical strong players like James and Christian would go with an archetype like this, but it looked pretty good going into the tournament. Not great, not awful, and like I said, you do get some nice tools in the deck with the Noctowl engine. So you have Noctowl, you have Baby Raging Bolt, you got Blood Moon. There's more options in here now than just smacking with Bellowing Thunder, so it becomes a little bit more of an appealing deck, but overall didn't have the great performance this weekend that these players might have hoped for. And we'll look at two more archetypes before we close out this video. One of them is going to be Dragazard, piloted by Jackson Ford. I know Jackson Ford was looking into a lot of archetypes going into this. I saw he wrote guides on, I think he wrote a guide on Charizard Noctowl, as well as a guide on Terapagos Buffalant. Ended up on Dragapult Charizard with the double Budew. You know, similar way that Budew can help Gardevoir have time to set up, help Dragapult, Dusknoir, even just straight Dusknoir have time to set up. It's a similar thing here. You'll also see him building the list towards expecting to be item locked with the one Jacques, one Brock scouting, but I'm just not sure that 1-in-1 is quite enough, especially without things like Lumineon and Forest Stone in the format. Maybe more players start looking into cutting down their Arvins more like we already saw in some of those other lists we looked at that were higher placing. And then the last archetype we'll look at is En's Zoroark. I know that there are En's Zoroark fans out there, and Jacob Peltier was able to take this to exactly top 64 at 64th place. So the En's Zoroark deck, using the Night Joker attack to copy either En's Darmanitan's Flame Body Cannon or En's Reshiram's Powerful Rage, or just that vanilla 170 attack. And then you have the reversal energies, so you can attack with En's Darmanitan, but you also have the reversal energy, so you could attack with Luxray, which Luxray you could just play it down if you're behind in prizes, attach reversal to it, and it's swinging 180 damage. If you'd like to support my channel and you also want awesome custom Pokemon designs like patches, t-shirts, hoodies, and more, check out qualitypatchdesigns.com and use the coupon code down in the description below, or use my link to get 10% off of your next order. Do what so many players have already done and check out my educational guides, private community, and one-on-one sessions over at Metafy. I've helped so many players begin to reach their goals, and so many players already reached their goals. So let me help you out becoming the best player you could be next over at metafy.gg/@CeliosNetwork. You can also check out free writings by me over at celiosnetwork.substack.com to see how I think about the game and how I suggest starting to improve at the game. You can also shop at one of my favorite clothing websites called intotheam.com and use my code CELIO10 for 10% off of amazing graphic tees, whatever you want here. They have so much to choose from. So check them out and use code CELIO10 to save some money and support my channel. Thanks for watching today's breakdown of the most successful decks at Atlanta Regionals 2025. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon TCG content. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time here on Celios Network.